When a film captures an audience and makes a whole lot of cash at the box office, studios, invariably, feel the need to capitalize on that success, and oftentimes it is to great critical and commercial acclaim. The Godfather had The Godfather Part 2, Avatar had Avatar The Way of Water, and Top Gun had Top Gun Maverick. Here, though, I want to talk about the sequels that let the fans down. They not only failed to recapture the magic of their predecessor, but they actively damaged the reputation of the franchise. Sometimes they limped along, other times that was it for the franchise as a whole. In all of these cases though, what came later was not better. 1999's The Matrix was a groundbreaking sci-fi action thriller that combined philosophical depth with neat visual effects and some of the best action sequences committed to film. The Wachowskis captured lightning in a bottle here, creating a narrative about reality, consciousness, and human agency. It was scaffolded by the hero's journey and wrapped in a cyberpunk aesthetic that, with each passing day, seems to feel more and more real. Keanu Reeves' Neo and Lawrence Fishburne's Morpheus became instantly iconic, as well as quotable characters, and the film's bullet time effects helped revolutionize action cinematography. The red pill blue pill metaphor has all but permeated our culture, and the idea that ours is a simulated reality has always been a fun concept to consider. The Matrix was a critical and commercial juggernaut, making more than $460 million worldwide and getting critical acclaim. It's also one of those movies whose reputation has only increased in the years since, thanks to its eternally relevant themes, select cinematography and directing, intelligent writing, philosophical ambitions, groundbreaking effects, and more. Really, it's a movie that's been fully embraced by audiences, and it's nothing short of a cultural touchstone. The same, however, cannot be said of its sequels. And I'm not just talking about the recent The Matrix Resurrections, but also The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions. Reloaded and Revolutions were back-to-back sequels that arrived just a few short months apart in 2003, the former in May, the latter in November. It's like if you released Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3 just a few months apart. Reloaded did well critically and was a smashing commercial hit, but most felt that it was inferior to its predecessor. It had some great action sequences and did a solid job in building on the mythology of the first. As Roger Ebert noted, it quote, develops its world with more detail than the first movie was able to afford, gives us our first glimpse of the underground human city of Zion, burrows closer to the heart of the secret of the Matrix, and promotes its hero, Neo, from confused draftee to a Christ figure in training, end quote. But people were starting to get tired, and the full measure of that was understood just a few months later when Revolutions landed with a thud. It made several $100 million fewer than Reloaded and had a much worse critical reception to boot. The effects, ever since the first, remained top-notch. But both of these films were basically commissioned by Warner Brothers, who wanted some big hits even if the directors were not as interested. It showed. The film was less ambitious than the first, was full of clunky dialogue and wooden acting, and ended up being a disappointing end to a fantastic beginning. In Mike Clark's amusing review for USA Today, he wrote, quote, this come-down of a series capper is so arch and pompous amid its clanks and collisions that you can only snicker at the verbal wind that obscures the din of marauding machinery, end quote. Little wonder, then, that the movie was put on ice for nearly 2 decades. The Wachowskis moved on to other ambitious flops such as Cloud Atlas, Jupiter Ascending, and Speed Racer, only for Lana Wachowski to come back for The Matrix Resurrections, again made because WB wanted it, not necessarily because she wanted to make it. The movie was a commercial bomb, though a critical improvement from Revolutions, though that might not be saying much. Still, reactions were divided. Though more earnest and sentimental than Revolutions, it, like The Guardian noted, seemed perfunctory, as though it being a widely beloved piece of intellectual property was enough reason for its existence. It turned out to not be enough. That said, I hope you're ready to return to The Matrix because WB refuses to let it rest in peace. 1994 Speed, starring Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, is one of the funnest movies of the 1990s. Directed by Jean de Bont, it's an action thriller about a bomb on a bus that needs to stay above 50 miles per hour or it'll explode. It's a neat, simple concept that resulted in nearly 2 hours of heart-pumping fun. A lot of the movie's success hinges upon the chemistry between Reeves' bomb disposal expert and Bullock's passenger who finds herself in the wrong place at the wrong time. The movie is able to maintain its believability despite the absurd situation, developing its characters and remaining pretty exciting. It was a critical and commercial success on release, banking more than $350 million on a $37 million budget, becoming a hit with critics and audiences, and landed in the top 10 of many of the best of lists for 1994. People dug the tight script, Dennis Hopper's outstanding villain, the relationship between Bullock and Reeves, and a generally original concept. It cemented both of them as actors to watch, and they went on to have pretty successful careers. Speed 2, Cruise Control, released in 1997, however, was like the complete opposite, both critically and commercially. The movie is, for lack of a better word, dumb. In it, Bullock's character, unwittingly again, gets involved in a plot to crash a ship into a tanker and must try to stop it. Reeves wisely decided to drop out of the movie at the last minute and was replaced by Jason Patric, who plays Bullock's LAPD boyfriend. Alas, Speed 2 lost everything that made the original work. There was almost no tension, and certainly not the kind that you get from being on a giant speeding metal trap on the highway. There were fewer stakes, and in losing Reeves and Hopper, they lost both the chemistry and interesting antagonist that made the first one work. The film's logic became ridiculous to the point of not even being fun. The movie was a critical and commercial disaster. It made $164 million on a budget of as high as $160 million, a box office bomb, and was hailed as one of the worst movies of the year, if not ever, as well as one of the worst sequels ever made. Stephen Hunter at the Washington Post had my favorite one-liner about the movie, quote, "The kinetics aren't that good, the twaddle is off the charts, and the characters seem written by monkeys on amphetamines with crayons," end quote. Whatever franchise that Fox was planning immediately was scrapped. The movie misunderstood what made the original successful, such as the stakes, villain, chemistry, and heart-pounding action, and, for some godforsaken reason, decided to go with something bigger for no reason. What's bigger than a bus? A ship, obviously, but ships aren't associated with speed. They're associated with being giant, lumbering things. A plane, which is often associated with speed, heft, and impact, would have been a better choice. Speed 2, in the end, was a lazy concept. That being said, both Reeves and Bullock have expressed interest in a third movie. Should it get made, I will, of course, be there. 1993's Jurassic Park, directed by Steven Spielberg, was a revolutionary film. With it, Spielberg had dethroned E.T. and himself with the highest-grossing film up until that point. It was a marvel of blockbuster filmmaking and special effects, wrapped up in a masterfully crafted narrative adapted from Michael Crichton's book of the same name. Famously, it used a mix of CGI and practical effects, blending the old world and the new to bring the dinosaurs to life. The movie inspired a sense of wonder in the audience, which ate it up. It would eventually gross over $1 billion at the box office and was critically acclaimed. Spielberg's direction, the character development and thematic depth, the John Williams score, all the pieces were assembled into a masterwork. Not only that, it was a cultural phenomenon, literally inspiring a whole new generation of paleontologists and interest in other sciences. They're literally called the Jurassic generation. It's not hard to understand why. Man has always wanted to see the past made flesh, something that the movie has continued to inspire. Alas, Spielberg also set the bar so high, there was nowhere for him to go but down. Now, I, unlike most people apparently, really like The Lost World. It brought back Jeff Goldblum, but the real star of the show, for me, is the T-Rex in San Diego. It's one of the funnest scenes in any movie ever, though this might just be a consequence of it really imprinting on me when I was a kid. Irrespective, while the special effects remained great, others found the character development underwhelming. Rotten Tomatoes captured the general sentiment well. Quote, "The Lost World demonstrates how far CG effects have come in the 4 years since Jurassic Park. Unfortunately, it also proves how difficult it can be to put together a truly compelling sequel," end quote. This carried over onto Jurassic Park 3, which brought back Sam Neill as well as Laura Dern for a few scenes. It was an even further step down from The Lost World, which at least added the added benefit of bringing a dinosaur into a completely new environment. Here, we were stuck on Isla Sorna, where Alan Grant needs to go to get funding for his project. Such is the life of a scientist. The movie was a bit darker than the other two, and had nearly none of the charm. Owen Gleiberman, writing for Entertainment Weekly, said it felt as though the old Spielberg magic was gone, and it was. Even Spielberg would say so. In a 2016 interview, he noted that, quote, "My sequels aren't as good as my originals because I go on to every sequel I've made and I'm too confident. This movie made $1 gazillion, which justifies the sequel, so I come in like it's going to be a slam dunk and I wind up making an inferior movie to the one before. I'm talking about The Lost World and Jurassic Park," end quote. Roger Ebert, for his part, enjoyed it with caveats, saying, quote, "I can't praise it for its art, but I must not neglect its craft, and on that basis I recommend it," end quote. The loss of wonder, frankly, continues with the Jurassic World movies. The first Jurassic World did its best to recapture it, and I think it did so to an extent. Having the dinosaurs go on a rampage when people were at the park was a nice touch, and it was a better movie than Jurassic Park 3, despite Chris Pratt not really being a good substitute for either Jeff Goldblum or Sam Neill. But with Fallen Kingdom, and especially Dominion, the magic was gone again. The movies made a hell of a lot of money, of course, but that's more because the afterglow of the original Jurassic Park is so strong, it consumes everything in its vicinity. a Jurassic movie will always make money, if only they could find it within them to recapture the charm. Atlas Shrugged 2 and 3 are an interesting case because yes, they are some of the worst sequels ever made, but as opposed to being terrible sequels to generally well-liked or even beloved predecessors like everything else on this list, the first Atlas Shrugged is also a pretty bad film that flopped at the box office. The first made less than $5 million on a $20 million budget and got demolished by critics. Roger Ebert's one-star review is an amusing read, with choice bits like, quote, "Much of the excitement centers on the tensile strength of steel," unquote, and, quote, "A man in black, always shot in shadow, is apparently John Galt. If you want to get a good look at him and find out why everybody's asking, I hope you can find out in part 2. I don't think you can hold out for part 3, end quote. But the fullness of the film is captured in this bit around the middle of the review, quote, "So, okay, let's say you know the novel, you agree with Ayn Rand, you're an objectivist or a libertarian, and you've been waiting eagerly for this movie. Man, are you going to get a letdown? It's not enough that a movie agree with you in however an incoherent and murky fashion. It would help if it were like, entertaining," end quote. The point of the first Atlas Shrugged and its sequels, similar to the books, is not to entertain but to preach. It's why John Galt, standing in for Ayn Rand, has such a long speech in the book. He's a self-insert for Rand, not a character unto himself. That speech, which spans dozens of pages in the book, is cut down to a few minutes in the third film. Despite the critical and commercial shellacking, the producers decided to proceed with Part 2 and Part 3. The former made $3.3 million on a $10 million budget, and the latter made $851,000 on a $5 million budget. The main cast was changed each time. For example, Dagny Taggart was played by Taylor Schilling, then Samantha Mathis, and lastly, Laura Regan. It's the same for many of the others. The unevenness extends to the rest of the movie. The critical consensus for the second part reads, quote, "Poorly written, clumsily filmed and edited, and hampered by amateurish acting, Atlas Shrugged Part 2 does no favors to the ideology it so fervently champions," end quote. The third part, which has a rare 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, doesn't even have a critical consensus, as so few seem to watch it. Billy Goodykins, writing for the Arizona Republic, wrote, quote, we get it. Capitalism is good and government is bad. But Atlas Shrugged, who is John Galt, is worse," end quote. That's not to say that everyone disliked it. Some of those who enjoy Rand's works argued for it, but even a great review from John Tamney, writing for Forbes, seems to undercut itself. Quote, "The film is a must-see because it, in a very handsome way, describes the world in which we live today, whereby the achievers are being shackled by the moochers. In terms of the film's quality, it seems high, but then so moved was this reviewer by the elevation of life's winners, it's arguably true that my bias blinds me to any weakness in the film that might exist," end quote. I mean, come on. The guy is basically saying that he likes the message so much, he doesn't really care about the quality of the movie. The movies are less about cinematic merit than ideology, but if you don't take the time to truss up ideology, few are going to pay attention. Appearances and presentation do, in fact, matter. The films were made with an evangelizing spirit, but collapsed under the weight of their own message. In trying to spread objectivism through cinema, the trilogy, ironically, demonstrated the dangers of ignoring the market that it claimed to champion. The more you preach, the less people listen. Oliver Stone's 1987 film, Wall Street, is one of my favorite movies, so much so it's in my Letterboxd top 4. It is the defining portrait of 80s greed, a film that critiqued and accidentally glamorized the ruthless pursuit of wealth. In fact, not only might it be the defining 80s film, it's a film for all seasons and ages, as the pursuit of wealth is one of the few unabated things that we share the world over. Michael Douglas played Gordon Gekko, one of the greatest villains ever made. His portrayal of the slick, morally bankrupt financier earned him an Academy Award, which turned the line, "Greed is good," which in the movie is actually "greed, for lack of a better word, is good," into a cultural mantra, and from what screenwriter Stanley Weiser said, also inspired an entire generation of kids to get into investment banking as a career. It struck a nerve with critics and audiences, combining sharp writing, excellent performances from Douglas and Charlie Sheen, who played the social climber and ambitious stockbroker Bud Fox, and a timely commentary on ethics. That message pretty much flew over everybody's heads. In a 2010 Variety article, Justin Chang said that while it was, quote, intended as a cautionary tale on the pitfalls of unchecked ambition and greed, Stone's 1987 original instead had the effect of turning Douglas's hugely charismatic and Oscar-winning villain into a household name and boardroom icon, an inspiration to the very power players and Wall Street wannabes for whom he set such a terrible example, end quote. Near the tail end of the Great Recession, Oliver Stone was back at it again, this time with a sequel, Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps. It had Douglas returning as Gecko decades after the events of the original film. He attempts to rebuild his life and reputation amid the new financial disaster. Shia LaBeouf played a young trader who's engaged to Gecko's estranged daughter, while Josh Brolin filled in the villain's shoes in this one as a ruthless hedge fund manager. But whereas the original was a sharp satire and a character study of Gordon Gekko and Bud Fox, two men from similar beginnings with wildly diverging ethics, Money Never Sleeps never rose to much beyond being a melodrama. None of the characters are well developed, and Gordon, instead of seemingly having made much progress over the few decades that he's been away, lost much of his edge. Stone seemingly didn't know what he even wanted to do with the character. Was he still manipulative? Was he redeemed? It is uncertain. David Edelstein, writing for Vulture, had one of my favorite reviews, quote, "The sequel to an influential 80s motion picture is so loaded with character and cross-currents that we wonder why it isn't a 13-hour cable miniseries instead of an impacted 2-hour mess. The film is like my portfolio, full of promise with minuscule returns," end quote. It got a mixed critical reception and made a modest amount at the box office, but whereas the original Wall Street was definitely a film for its time, this one was not. Audiences that wanted biting commentary were better served by The Social Network, which came out a week after Money Never Sleeps. The film was, for lack of a better word, weak-willed. It forgot what made the original powerful: clarity, cynicism, sharpness, and a dangerously charismatic villain. The original packed a punch. This one could not even lift a finger. I want to eventually do a video on the Pirates of the Caribbean movies because the first three might just be the most fun movies ever made, but I'm content to wax poetic on them for a short while for now. Gore Verbinski's original Pirates trilogy was Hollywood alchemy. He took a genre known for its steep costs and huge failures, and a particular property based on a theme park ride of all things, and made movie magic. 2003's The Curse of the Black Pearl was a massive commercial and solid critical hit on its release. Driven by Johnny Depp's instantly iconic turn as Captain Jack Sparrow, with wonderful performances from Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley, the movie was praised for its wit, inventiveness, action, and adventuring. It also had a fantastic supporting cast of memorable characters like Gibbs, Captain Barbossa, definitely one of the funnest villains in any movie ever, and James Norrington. It delivered what I want most when I see a movie in theaters: fun. Others thought so as well. It made more than $650 million worldwide. This was a hard act to follow, but Verbinski proved to be the right man for the job. Dead Man's Chest and At World's End were both a lot of fun and continued to build on the mythos established in the first one. The former cleared $1 billion worldwide, the latter almost got there. They also introduced Davy Jones, still perhaps one of the finest examples of motion capture and CGI in any film ever. He was a fantastic villain, and keeping the core trio together also kept the charm in a way that just faded from the aforementioned Jurassic Park movies. I'll say it, the original Pirates trilogy is a better trilogy than the Jurassic Park trilogy, even though Jurassic Park might be the best movie between them. But then Gore Verbinski decided to leave after the third movie. The guy was burned out, which I understand. Making pirate movies is not an easy task, and filming on the water, whether it's open ocean or not, is a lot more taxing than only being beholden to land. Plus, he was working on Rango at the time, another fun movie. Losing Verbinski was one thing, but 2011's On Stranger Tides also lost Bloom and Knightley, as Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann. This was a massive loss. Part of the charm and fun of the original three rests on the dynamic between Bloom, Knightley, and Depp. Making it basically a Jack Sparrow movie was what Verbinski warned about, saying, quote, "You don't want just the Jack Sparrow movie. It's like having a garlic milkshake. He's the spice and you need a lot of straight men," end quote. To be sure, On Stranger Tides, directed by Rob Marshall, made bank, clearing $1 billion at the box office, but it suffered a critical reproach from audiences and critics. Rene Rodriguez, writing for the Miami Herald, clocked it, quote, "Even the most forgiving moviegoer will recognize this movie as the blatant cash grab that it is," end quote. Encouraged by the profits and perhaps hoping that they could paper over the critics, Disney forged ahead with 2017's Dead Men Tell No Tales. By this point, it was obvious the Pirates movies were cursed treasure. It got worse reviews than its predecessor, and more troublingly for Disney, it made just under $800 million at the box office. Not bad until you consider that, at the upper end, the budget was $320 million. The thing about sequels is that they start showing their issues early on. If those issues aren't addressed, the decline kicks in and is very difficult, if not impossible, to stop. This was a more than 20% drop in box office, a sizable chunk. It had new characters and brought back fan favorites for cameos, but it wasn't enough. Interest was waning, and not even the star power of Johnny Depp could keep it going. The magic was gone. The post-Verbinski Pirates films flatlined in fun. What had begun as an epic piratical adventure became generic franchise fodder. Losing their best director and cast of characters that made it work meant that the fumes soon ran out. Producer Jerry Bruckheimer seems optimistic about a new Pirates movie being made, and Bloom himself has said, quote, "I personally think it'd be great to get the band back together," end quote. If they do, and if it has Gore Verbinski, count me in. Making a successful movie is like catching lightning in a bottle. It's hard to do once, almost impossible to do twice, and few are able to do it more than that. Whether through misunderstanding the original's appeal, missing the original cast, or going over the top, many of these sequels serve as cautionary tales about the challenges of continuing successful stories. Commercial success alone cannot justify a sequel. There needs to be a purpose to it. Often, the best way to honor great films is to leave them alone. That being said, if a movie makes enough money, odds are high that the studios are going to try to squeeze it for all it's worth. But that's just show business.